What's up, peeps? Welcome to Wasted Space, and today we're back with War for the Overworld again. They released an enormous patch on Wednesday called the Überlord patch, and I figured it was probably time to come back into War for the Overworld and show you where it's gone in the last couple of months, and most importantly, with this recent update, what the UI is all about, because they've released this lovely new UI which looks a lot more complete than it was last time I made a video on it, and obviously there's not a huge amount of information on it. This is all very new and very unfinished. So as you can see, there are no tooltips on anything really. So if I just do a brief explanation first of what the UI is all about. We have our gold reserves here and the amount of space for gold in our dungeon. So this will fill up to our maximum. When that bar is full, you can't fit any more in your vaults and around your dungeon core. You have a ritual tracker here that will show you how strong your rituals are, although admittedly this is not fully functional yet. That bar won't do anything. Rituals are in, but the bar doesn't do a huge amount. You have your sins UI as before, so this is how many sins we have, and then this around the side is how fast they're researching and how much our progress towards the next one is. And then we have our mana bar on the right. This shows you where your heart is, and you can jump back by clicking on it, and then the rest of this stuff down here is relatively similar to before, just very polished. So obviously we now have a working minimap, and I kind of prefer having it straight on like that. And then we also have a new panel just here, and this will be very familiar to anybody who has been playing Dungeon Keeper before, and very unfamiliar to anybody else because it's got no tooltips on it again. But basically this enables you to see what creatures are in your dungeon, and by default it will show on the right hand side your imps, and on the left hand side your imps, and on the right hand side you can see your creatures. And if you click through these icons, that will change the information that's being displayed to show you different bits and bobs about them. So here, this will show you our various happiness levels, from really quite angry right the way up to ecstatic. In here, whether they're working and what they're doing. And I believe the decipher of this is actually working on something, be it in a foundry or whatever their job is, in an archive for a cultist, that sort of thing. This is whether they're eating. That is on guard duty. This, I believe, covers any jobs that are not covered by the rest of them. That's a little non-transparent. And this is straight up idle down the bottom. Then next one, combat. So in combat, running away, running to a rally flag, and that is knocked out, unconscious. And finally, by level, so 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. This here for the imps is exactly the same sort of setup. So next up, in order to show you a few bits and bobs of how this new stuff interacts, it basically all comes down to the Veins of Evil in here, and I need to unlock some. And in doing so, I can show you this very cool new UI and a whole bunch of new veins in here, new sins that you can unlock. So we're going to start off just by getting the sort of the default stuff, and as we click on these, you'll notice that normally that would have moved this middle section down and enabled me to access the next tier, but it's all been changed. This central neutral section will only move if you unlock 2 things in it. But those 2 things can come from the side trees as well. So if I unlock a Beast Den and then Prophecy over here, the middle will move as well. And so they interact a bit weirdly, and most of what you want obviously is down the bottom, but what it means is that you don't necessarily have to go through everything in this neutral tree in the centre in order to reach the more high level stuff down the bottom, the torture chamber, the spirit chamber, that sort of thing. You can go down these side routes, although to begin with it's always a pretty good idea to grab the basics, archive, and then I need to unlock one more thing in order to get the summon imp. So barracks and summon imp. And the reason I'm getting this imp, both obviously summon work is important, but is so I can show you the mana locking, because this is something that wasn't very sort of present previously and they've introduced now. So as I summon these imps, you'll see in the top right hand side of our bar at the top, I'm actually reserving mana from our mana bar for the imps I've just cast, and I now can't use that mana for anything else. And this is kind of a thing that they're bringing in that I don't think was really something that happened in the original version of the game, but here is going to be really kind of important and kind of limiting as to how far you can progress, because you'll notice if I unlock the foundry, and I think we've already got one, yep, and just build a couple of traps somewhere, there you go, in the long corridor, and these are also taking up my mana, and depending on which trap it is, some of them take up quite a lot of mana. So there's this very sort of strange and interesting mana locking thing going on that's going to very limit, I think, how fast you can expand because you're limited by imps, and also how well defended your dungeon can be at any given time, because there's only so many traps you can place, and some of that is, it's really quite limiting if you start building the big traps. There's a gargoyle trap right down the bottom here, and those take up something like 200 mana per trap, and you've only got 1,000. So you can really quickly starve yourself completely out of mana. So aside from that, there are a couple of things that they've introduced that aren't really finished, but are there, and it connects to this ritual bar here. So this is our sanctuary, and this is where we can do the rituals from. And by clicking on there, you notice we've got a sort of slightly ropey UI pop up in the top left, and there's nothing in it because we don't have a ritual yet, so I'm going to grab Avarice, which is one of them. And now when I go in here, I can select Avarice as a ritual, and my cultists will run over here and start to channel that ritual. And eventually this ritual UI here will both show you in the center, I assume, which ritual it is that you're channeling, and then this red bar will fill up to show you when it's done. And if I just grab... We don't have any cultists, wonderful. So no one is going to finish that ritual because you need cultists to do it. Where's the portals? Ah, the portals are not connected. Another thing that I've noticed they've done, and it doesn't, I don't know if it was in this patch or recently, but in one before, is you've now got a very limited amount of zoom. Just like in the original games, you can't zoom out any further than that. And that is as far as you go. Now, it allows you to zoom out almost ridiculously far to begin with. And I think this is going to work much nicer, because there was something to do with how it limited your control over the map and your vision over the map that meant it made it more difficult. So yeah, now we've got some cultists coming in. They'll probably get angry if I don't let them get a lair first, but if I just drop him in there, he will now start channeling our ritual. And when the ritual is done, I will be able to cast it, and this particular ritual, Avarice, will convert my mana into gold. And of course, with these traps and imps everywhere, that's not going to end up being particularly efficient. So I'll just sell these off so I can show you how it works. The sell icon here is still a little bit tricky to use. You have to be right over the object rather than over the tile underneath. But yeah, these are small things. I'm sure they'll sort out as we go. Cultist has decided he is bored of channeling my ritual and has gone somewhere else. Okay, so while he does that, I'll show you the other one, which is in here, in the alchemy room. You can do exactly the same thing, but with potions. Now, we don't actually have any potions that we can do at the moment, and... oh, look, I can. Work a lot as a potion. So I should now be able to click in here and actually tell them to make some potions. And when I have some crackpots, which again, I don't have any in the dungeon yet, they will come in here and they'll start making these. When they're finished, you'll be able to actually drag the potion from on top of the cauldron and drop it somewhere on the map. Depending on which potion it is, it's going to do a different thing. Work a lot in this case, I can drop onto a unit and it will make him, guess what? Work a lot. But there are some very cool ones, and there used to be a functionality where the alchemy would constantly produce a certain amount of money. Now it can produce a specific potion that you need to make, this transmutation one here, which will add gold to an area, and that sort of kind of is a more direct interaction. So it's no longer just a passive kind of boring way of doing things. You now have to be very active with trying to make use of these potions and also these rituals. So now this ritual up here is finished, again with the slightly clunky UI. Eventually I'll be able to use that to cast this spell, but in here I can now click Avarice and it will cast it, and my mana is draining and my gold will be going up, although as you can see not by a huge amount. This is kind of inefficient, this spell. Now the only other sort of rooms that they've introduced that aren't working quite like they intend them to but will do are first of all, we have in here the tavern. This is just supposed to entertain people, and they'll be able to come in here and eat and raise their happiness levels. We have an arena which looks very much like a prison. This should, in theory, attract beastmasters to your dungeon, and then the beastmasters will make your beasts randomly fight each other in there for experience and entertainment, but again, not functional yet, hence why it's got a very placeholder graphic. And the other one that's in but not completely functional, I think, is at this end. Yep, here we go. The Spirit Chamber. And what you can do with these is, if I was to take, say, this Bafu, drop him on there, he's going to sit and I mean, it's not going to show you it because this is the bit that's not functional about this room yet, but for everybody that's in there, they will be training constantly and quite rapidly. There's just no graphic for it. And while they're there, they will cost mana to be from your mana locking. And they did say they're supposed to cost gold as well, although so far I'm not seeing any evidence of that. But they will just sit in there and train up as if they were in an arena. So that's kind of a brief gist of what they've added and what they've done with the new UI. In particular, this monster UI was badly needed. You now have a feeling that you know what's going on in your dungeon and what you can do with your creatures, what levels they are. Just generally, you can track what's happening. The rest of the UI just looks a lot more pretty. I don't think it's sort of drastic changes there, other than in the veins of Evil and what you're now capable of doing in here. So I think that's kind of the new UI and the new building elements they've added. And also, I'm not going to go individually into each of the various new sins they've added, because there are, I think they said 21 new ones put in this patch, which is huge, obviously. I will link to the full description of all of the sort of abilities and sins they've added in, because there are abilities that they've added to the creatures as well and the mobs that you just can't see. The possession system, while improved, so for example we now have a ceiling, which is quite nice. You still can't do anything in here except for run around, but it is quite a lot less buggy, which is a nice start. So one last thing I can show you, they introduced a couple of new maps, and one of them I was particularly excited by, Stumpy's Challenge. Now this is a survival map, and it was part of what they promised as stretch goals on Kickstarter, and because they got quite a bit of funding through the Kickstarter, this is something that they've started working on. And basically this is time limited, and not only time limited but damn hard, I might add. And what you need to do is, if you look at the map down there, we have 3 different alleyways in which people are advancing, and we need to just beat off the waves of attackers. If at any point you fail and your pighibitor is killed, then the apocalypse will begin, and one of 3 pigs will come and charge at you down these alleyways. And yeah, it's really hard. Anyway guys, this has kind of shown you what's going on. I don't think there's a huge point sitting here. This is not intended to be Let's Play. This is intended to give you an idea of what the game's all about and what they've changed recently to make the game worthwhile. My concerns still are that, okay, first of all, we don't have that much content that works to play. A lot of it's sandbox stuff. But the second one is kind of, there used to be a real emphasis on money, and money was everything. Because of Payday, and I can still hear in my head Richard's writings, "It is payday." And that used to fill you with a bit of dread, especially when things weren't going so well at the start of the game, or when things were making you work for it at the end of the game, and so you weren't getting the gold in because you were busy attacking or whatever. That's going to get missed, I think. Or at least at the moment it's looking like it's going to get missed, because I've heard nothing about the idea of introducing Payday back in. So I'm concerned basically with the longevity and how well the game's going to last as far as a single game is concerned. You know, the limiting feels too artificial. Oh no, they killed it. Yeah, this, I think, the mana capping, it feels a bit artificial. I hope that that's not the only thing they try and do to limit the games, and in fact they try and bring through on top of that the idea like you had before of the game being limited by gold as a resource, excuse me, and also being limited by exactly how much you could do at once as a player. You were always in a position where you were needing to try and farm gold, but you were busy trying to do other stuff as well, and trying to keep on top of that. And the occasional moment where you forgot, and then Payday comes around and you look up and you realise you don't have the money to pay your creatures, and you're about to lose half of them because they get pissed off and run away. That doesn't seem to happen in this either. I don't think I've ever managed to get a minion so angry they've just left my dungeon. So I hope these are things they bring through now that the core of the game feels solid, but that's the only reason these are frustrating now, and the lack of content is frustrating, is because as far as the mechanics are concerned, it works. So, yeah, let's hope that this is sort of the stepping stone now towards getting the content into the game, so we can see the single player, so we can see the multiplayer with more stuff, so we can see the map editor, which has been referenced a few times in the patch notes but isn't completely functional within the game yet. So there's a lot hopefully coming soon, and I really hope that this is kind of the stepping stone and the starting point with this UI now sorted, that we see the game sort of getting towards, not completion, but towards the point where you're playing not a Bedrock beta, but just a straight up beta. And now we have the Porkopolis, Pigzilla, and another Pigzilla. They have random names. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, guys. This has been a really bad video on War for the Overworld. Certainly a really bad survival section. I have no idea what I'm doing here. And I will see you next time.